She had exactly 10 seconds to make a choice that would either save a life or end her own. In the brutal world of the Italian mafia, you don't speak, you don't look, and you certainly don't touch the Don. But when Biber, a struggling waitress at the city's most exclusive restaurant, overheard a conversation meant for the grave, she broke the golden rule. She slipped a crumpled napkin under the whiskey glass of Lorenzo Moretti, the most dangerous man in New York. The note read, "Your fiancé set a trap. Leave now." What happens when a kingpin realizes the only person he can trust is a nobody, and what happens when he decides to make her his queen? The scent of the obsidian room was always the same old money truffle oil and the metallic tang of fear masked by expensive cologne. It was the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, a place where a reservation required a background check and a bank account with 7 zeros for Biber. Vance, it was just the place that paid her enough in tips to keep her younger brother Toby in his specialized physical therapy program. She was 23, invisible and efficient. She had mastered the art of being part of the furniture. She knew how to pour a 1945 Romani Conti without shaking, even when the men at the table were discussing how to dispose of a body in the East River. Table 4. The maitre d', a nervous man named Claude, hissed at her as she passed the kitchen station. "The Moretti party. Do not screw this up, Biber. Lorenzo Moretti is in a mood." Biber felt a cold shiver trace her spine. Lorenzo Enzo Moretti, the capo dei capi, the king of New York. He didn't come to the obsidian room often, but when he did, the air in the restaurant grew heavy, as if the oxygen was being sucked out by his sheer presence. He was 32 years of violent perfection, dark hair, slicked back a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a stormy sea, eyes that missed nothing. Tonight he was dining with Bianca Valenti, his fiancée. It was the wedding of the century, according to the tabloids, a union of the 2 most powerful crime families on the East Coast. Bianca was stunning a vision in red silk, but Biber had always found her smile too sharp, her eyes too predatory. "Yes, Claude," Biber whispered, smoothing her black apron. She took the tray of appetizers, caviar on blinis and oysters flown in from Japan, and made her way to the secluded booth in the back. As she approached, the tension was palpable. Lorenzo was staring at his phone, his body language closed off. Bianca was sipping her champagne, her eyes darting around the room with a nervous energy that didn't match her poised demeanor. Biber served the plates in silence. "More scotch," Lorenzo said. His voice was a low rumble, like a luxury car idling. He didn't look up. "Macallan, the 64. "Immediately, sir," Biber murmured. She retreated to the bar, retrieved the crystal decanter, and realized the ice bucket was empty. She had to go to the wine cellar in the basement to get the special artisanal ice spheres Lorenzo preferred. The cellar was freezing, dimly lit by flickering vintage bulbs. Biber hurried to the freezer unit in the back. Just as she grabbed the ice tongs, the heavy oak door at the top of the stairs creaked open. Footsteps, sharp, clicking heels echoed on the stone floor. Biber froze. Staff weren't supposed to be down here during service unless necessary, but something about the stealthy way the person entered made her instinctually step back into the shadows of the Pinot Noir rack. "I'm in the cellar. Talk fast, Dante." It was Bianca. Her voice wasn't the silky, seductive purr she used at the table. It was jagged, impatient. Biber pressed her hand over her mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Dante Russo was the head of the rival family, the man sworn to wipe the Moretti bloodline from the earth. "Yes, he's drinking," Bianca hissed into her phone. "He's distracted. He thinks tonight is just a date night before the merger." A pause. "No, the car is rigged, but I need you to hit him before he gets to the car, if possible. I want it done publicly. I want his men to see him bleed out." Baber's eyes widened. 9:15 p.m., Bianca confirmed. "That's when we leave. The shooter needs to be across the street. I'll drop my purse as a signal to stop walking. Make sure you don't miss Dante. If Lorenzo survives, he'll skin us both alive." Bianca hung up. She took a deep breath, adjusted her hair in the reflection of a wine cabinet, and turned back to the stairs. Biber waited until the door clicked shut before she collapsed against the cold shelving. Her legs felt like jelly. 9:15 p.m. She checked her cheap wristwatch. It was 9:05 p.m. 10 minutes. Lorenzo Moretti had 10 minutes to live. If she said nothing, a man would die. A dangerous man. Yes, a criminal, sure, but a man who had never been rude to her, who tipped the staff $500 just for pouring water. If she spoke up, Bianca would deny it. Bianca, the daughter of a Don, would have Baber killed before she finished the sentence. Who would the great Lorenzo Moretti believe, his high society fiancée, or a waitress with holes in her shoes? Baber grabbed the bucket of ice. Her hands were shaking so hard, the tongs rattled. She had to do something. She couldn't walk out to the dining floor and scream, "Murder!" She needed a way to warn him without exposing herself to Bianca immediately. She ran back upstairs, her mind racing. She reached the service station. She grabbed the bottle of Macallan. She needed a coaster. No, a coaster was too thick to write on quickly. A napkin. She snatched a white cocktail napkin and a black ballpoint pen. With trembling fingers, she wrote 5 words. The ink bled slightly into the soft paper. "Your fiancé set a trap. Leave now." She folded the napkin into a tight square. She checked the time. 9:08 p.m. Baber took a deep breath plastered on her professional mask and walked back to table 4. Bianca was smiling now, her hand resting on Lorenzo's forearm. She looked like the picture of a loving future wife. It made Baber sick. "Your scotch, sir." Baber said, her voice steady, despite the chaos in her mind. She placed the fresh glass down. As she did, she didn't set it on the leather coaster. She set it directly on the folded napkin. She pressed her index finger down on the base of the glass for a fraction of a second too long, forcing Lorenzo to look at her hand, then at the napkin, then up at her eyes. For the first time that night, Lorenzo Moretti looked at her. Really looked at her. Baber widened her eyes, slightly a plea. A signal. She tapped the napkin once with her pinky finger, then pulled away. "Is everything all right?" Bianca asked sharply, noticing the delay. "You're hovering." "My apologies, ma'am," Baber said, bowing her head. Just ensuring the glass was clean. She walked away. Her heart was in her throat. She didn't look back. She marched straight to the kitchen through the swinging doors and leaned against the stainless steel counter, praying she hadn't just signed her own death warrant. Lorenzo Moretti didn't become the head of the family by being oblivious. He had survived 3 assassination attempts, a federal indictment, and a war with the Russian mob. He knew the smell of danger. When the waitress, the one with the chestnut hair and the eyes that looked too big for her face, had pressed the glass down, he felt the anomaly. The service at the Obsidian Room was flawless. They never used paper napkins for high-end scotch. They used leather coasters. He watched her walk away. She was stiff, terrified. He looked down at the glass. The corner of the white paper was sticking out. "Enzo, darling," Bianca purred, running a finger up his bicep. "You're distracted tonight. Are you thinking about the honeymoon?" Lorenzo didn't smile. He lifted his glass. Bianca reached for her purse. "I'm just going to freshen up before we go. We should leave in about 5 minutes. 9:15. The time, specificity, was the enemy of innocence. Lorenzo unfolded the napkin in his lap below the table edge. "Your fiancée set a trap. Leave now." His blood ran cold, not with fear, but with a sudden clarifying rage. He looked at Bianca. She was checking her reflection in her compact mirror, checking her teeth, checking the time on her diamond watch. Dante, he thought immediately. Bianca had been pushing for peace talks with the Russo family. It all made sense. The sudden affection, the insistence on this specific restaurant, the specific time. He had 2 choices: dismiss the note as a prank and risk a bullet in the head, or trust the waitress. He glanced at the kitchen doors. The girl was gone. Why would she risk her life to tell him this, Enzo? Bianca asked. Lorenzo crumpled the napkin in his fist. He stood up abruptly. "We're leaving," he said. His voice was ice. "Now, but I haven't finished my... Now, Bianca." He didn't wait for her. He signaled his head of security, a giant named Marcus, who was standing by the entrance. Marcus saw the look on Lorenzo's face, the code red look, and tapped his earpiece. Lorenzo grabbed Bianca's tool. Not gently. "Enzo, you're hurting me," she hissed, trying to pull away, as he marched her toward the exit. "You'll survive," he muttered. They reached the valet stand at 9:11 p.m., 4 minutes early. "Bring the car," Marcus barked at the valet. "No," Lorenzo said. He scanned the street, the rooftops, the parked vans. "We take the back exit. Now." "The back?" Bianca's face went pale. "Enzo, don't be ridiculous. The Rolls is right here." She tried to stop, to reach for her purse, to drop it the signal. Lorenzo saw her hand twitch toward the bag. He clamped his hand over hers. "Keep walking." They burst out through the kitchen exit into the alleyway. The staff stared. Biber was there, scrubbing a pot. She looked up, her face wet with steam. Lorenzo locked eyes with her for a split second. A silent nod. "I heard you." He shoved Bianca into the back of his secondary escort SUV, a bulletproof Escalade waiting in the alley. "Go!" Lorenzo shouted to his driver. As the SUV screeched out of the alley and onto the main road, the clock struck 9:15 p.m. Boom! The sound was earth-shattering. Lorenzo looked out the rear window. In front of the restaurant where he would have been standing had he waited for the Rolls, a fireball consumed the street. His Rolls-Royce Phantom was a twisted wreck of burning metal. The shockwave shattered the windows of the obsidian room. Inside the SUV, the silence was deafening. Bianca was trembling, staring at the fire. She wasn't acting anymore. She was terrified, not of the explosion, but of the man sitting next to her. Lorenzo slowly turned to face her. The firelight from the street illuminated the hard planes of his face. He looked like a demon. "You missed," Lorenzo said, softly. Bianca opened her mouth to scream, but Marcus had already drawn his weapon. "Take her to the warehouse," Lorenzo ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "Do not let her die. She has a lot to tell us about Dante Russo." As the car sped away into the New York night, Lorenzo didn't look at his sobbing ex-fiancée. He pulled the crumpled napkin from his pocket. The waitress. She was still back there. Dante Russo's men were watching the restaurant. When they realized Lorenzo wasn't dead and that the trap had been blown, they would look for the leak. Bianca had been in the cellar. Someone must have heard her. "Marcus," Lorenzo said, pulling out his phone. "Boss, turn the car around. Send the B team to the alley." "Why, we have the target." "No," Lorenzo said, smoothing the napkin with his thumb. "We left the savior behind. If Bianca knows she was overheard, Dante knows. They'll kill everyone in that kitchen to find the rat." He looked at the smudged handwriting. "Find the girl," Lorenzo commanded. "Bring her to me, alive." Baber stood frozen in the alleyway, the dishwater soaking into her sleeves. The explosion had knocked the pans off the drying rack. The screaming from the street was muffled by the brick walls. But the smoke was rising thick and black against the skyline. He made it, she thought, a wave of relief crashing into her. He took the back exit. But then the realization hit her like a physical blow. Bianca was with him. Bianca would know. Bianca would realize that her plan failed because someone tipped him off. And Bianca knew someone was in the cellar. Biber dropped the scrubbing brush. She couldn't go back inside. She couldn't go home to Toby. If they found her, they would find her brother too. She stripped off her apron, tossing it into the dumpster. She grabbed her coat from the staff locker near the door and ran. It started to rain a cold, biting New York drizzle. Baber didn't have a plan. She just had panic. She ran down Fifth Avenue, blending into the crowd of shocked onlookers gathering near the smoke. She needed to get to Toby. She needed to move him. She made it to the subway station, her lungs burning. She fumbled for her Metro card. Suddenly, a heavy hand landed on her shoulder. Baber spun around, a scream trapped in her throat. It was a man in a dark trench coat, hard face, scar over his eyebrow. "Baber Vance?" he asked. It wasn't a question. No. You have the wrong person." She tried to back away, but another man appeared behind her, blocking the turnstile. "Mr. Moretti sends his regards," the first man said. Baber's vision blurred. Moretti. Did he think she was part of the trap? Did he want to silence the witness? "Please," she begged, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I saved him. I just wrote the note. I don't know anything else." "We know," the man said, his grip tightening. "But Dante Russo's men are 2 blocks away, and they aren't as polite as we are. You're coming with us." "No!" Biber stomped on the man's instep and bolted. Adrenaline, sheer and primal, took over. She ducked under the turnstile arm, sprinting down the stairs toward the platform. "Secure her! Don't shoot!" she heard them yell. She reached the platform just as a train was pulling in. It was chaos. She shoved her way into a crowded car. The doors hissed shut just as the men in trench coats reached the yellow line. They slapped the glass, frustration etched on their faces. Baber collapsed into a plastic seat, hugging her knees. She was safe for now, but she had no money. The Mafia was hunting her, and the only man who could help her had just sent goons to abduct her. She got off 2 stops later in Queens. She ran the 6 blocks to the dilapidated apartment building where she lived with Toby. She burst through the door. "Biber!" Toby called out from his wheelchair in the living room. "You're home early. Did you see the news? There was a bombing in Manhattan." "Pack a bag," Biber said, breathless, locking the 3 deadbolts on the door. "Toby, we have to go, now." "What?" "Why, Baber, you're scaring me. I messed up tea. I messed up baddies. We have to leave the city." She rushed to the bedroom, throwing clothes into a duffel bag. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Knock. 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 The sound was polite, controlled, terrifying. Baber froze. She looked at Toby. He went pale. "Baber," a voice called from the hallway. It wasn't the goons from the subway. This voice was deeper, richer. "Open the door, Ms. Vance." She knew that voice. She had heard it order a Macallan 25 an hour ago. She crept to the peephole. Standing in the flickering fluorescent light of her hallway, flanked by 4 armed guards, was Lorenzo Moretti. He was still wearing his suit dusted with ash. There was a smear of blood on his collar, not his. "Go away," she shouted through the door. "I called the police." "We own the police," Lorenzo replied calmly. "And Dante Russo's hit squad is currently coming up the fire escape. You have about 30 seconds before they breach your window." Crash. Glass shattered in the back bedroom. Toby screamed. Baber didn't think. She unlocked the front door and threw it open. Lorenzo stood there, a towering figure of darkness. "Help us," she gasped. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, raising a silver pistol with a silencer. 2 men in ski masks burst from the bedroom, weapons raised. Pfft, pfft. Lorenzo fired twice. 2 clean shots to the chest. The intruders dropped before they could even aim at Toby. Lorenzo lowered the gun, turning to Baber. The smell of gunpowder and expensive cologne filled the tiny apartment. "I told you," Lorenzo said, his eyes scanning her face for injuries. "You saved my life, Baber. Now let me save yours." He gestured to Marcus. "Get the boy. We move to the safe house. Now." Baber watched as the massive bodyguard gently lifted Toby, wheelchair and all. Lorenzo held out a hand to her. It was large, scarred, and steady. "Come with me," he said, "or stay here and die. The choice is yours." Baber looked at her shattered window, the dead bodies on her floor, and then at the hand of the devil himself. She took it. The drive was silent, a blur of rain-streaked windows and adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. Baber sat in the back of the armored SUV, clutching Toby's hand so tight her knuckles turned white. Lorenzo sat opposite them, typing on a secure tablet, his face illuminated by the blue light. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm for a man who had just executed 2 people in a queen's apartment. The safe house wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Located on a private cliffside estate in the Hamptons, 2 hours from the city, it was a sprawling mansion of glass and steel, surrounded by 12-foot walls and patrolled by men with assault rifles. "Welcome home," Lorenzo said dryly as the iron gates groaned open. "This isn't home," Baber snapped, finding a sudden spark of courage. "This is a prison." Lorenzo closed his tablet and looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "A prison keeps you in. A fortress keeps them out. Out there, Baber, you are a loose end. You are the waitress who saw too much. Dante Russo doesn't leave witnesses. Here you are, a guest." The car stopped. Servants, no staff, efficient and armed, swarmed the vehicle. They helped Toby into a wheelchair ramp that seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Take the boy to the East Wing," Lorenzo ordered. "Dr. Aris is waiting. Full workup. I want to know about his condition." "No." Baber lunged forward, blocking the staff. "You are not taking him anywhere. I go where he goes." Lorenzo stepped out of the car, towering over her. The rain matted his dark hair to his forehead, making him look less like a businessman and more like a predator. He stepped close, crowding her space, forcing her to look up at him. "Biber," he said, his voice low, vibrating in her chest. "My medical team is the best in the world. They treat bullet wounds, shrapnel, and trauma. Your brother has cerebral palsy, correct, and recent muscle atrophy." Biber blinked, stunned. How do you know that? I know everything," Lorenzo said simply. "I had a dossier on you the moment you left the restaurant. I know you work double shifts. I know you're behind on rent. I know you've been denied the grant for his surgery 3 times. He leaned in his lips inches from her ear. "Dr. Aris is a neurosurgeon, one of the top 3 in the country. He's on my payroll because he owes me a life. Let him help your brother, or you can take Toby back to Queens and wait for Dante to burn your building down. Choose." Biber looked at Toby. He looked scared, but he also looked tired, so incredibly tired of the pain. She swallowed her pride. "If you hurt him—" "I don't hurt children," Lorenzo said, straightening his cuffs. "I only hurt people who deserve it. Follow Marcus. He will show you to your room. We will speak at dinner." Biber was led to a room that was bigger than her entire apartment. Silk sheets, a walk-in closet, filled with clothes in her size which terrified her, and a view of the stormy Atlantic Ocean crashing against the rocks below. She showered, scrubbing the smell of smoke and fear off her skin. When she emerged, wrapped in a plush robe, she found a dress laid out on the bed. Simple, black, elegant. She dressed and went downstairs. The dining room was a cavernous hall with a table long enough to seat 20, but it was set for 2. Lorenzo was already there, swirling a glass of red wine. He had changed into a fresh suit, charcoal grey, no tie. He looked devastatingly handsome, which annoyed her. "Sit," he commanded. Biber sat. The food was brought out, truffle risotto. The smell reminded her of the restaurant, of the note. "Why?" Lorenzo asked, cutting into his steak. He didn't look at her. "Why what? Why did you write the note?" He looked up, his gaze piercing. "You knew who I was. You knew who Bianca was. The smart thing to do was to walk away, to let the bad men kill each other. Why risk your life for a stranger?" Biber played with her fork. "Because," she paused, "because my father was a bad man. He hurt people, and one day someone could have warned him, could have stopped him from walking into a fight, but they didn't. They let him die because they thought he deserved it." She looked Lorenzo in the eye. "I don't get to decide who deserves to die, Mr. Moretti. I just saw a trap. And I hate traps. It's cowardly." Lorenzo stopped chewing. He stared at her for a long time. The silence stretched thick and heavy. "Cowardly," he repeated, testing the word. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Most people call me a monster. You call my enemies cowards." He took a sip of wine. "Bianca has been dealt with." Biber's stomach churned. "Did you kill her?" "No," Lorenzo said calmly. "Death is too easy. She is currently in a very uncomfortable room, explaining to my associates exactly how Dante Russo infiltrated my operation. She will live, but she will never step foot in New York again. And Dante is celebrating," Lorenzo said, his eyes darkening. "He thinks I'm dead. The news reported the explosion. I have kept my survival a secret. The media thinks I was in the car." Biber frowned. "Why let him think you're dead?" "Because Piccola," Lorenzo said, the Italian endearment slipping out effortlessly. When your enemy thinks you are in the grave, he gets sloppy. He lowers his guard. He plans a victory party." Lorenzo stood up and walked around the table. He stopped behind Baber's chair. She could feel the heat radiating off him. He placed his hands on the back of her chair, trapping her. Tomorrow night is the Gala of Shadows. It's a masked ball hosted by the Syndicate. All the families will be there. Dante Russo will be there to claim my territory. Lorenzo leaned down, his cheek brushing against her hair. I am going to walk into that ballroom and take back my kingdom, but I cannot walk in alone. If I go alone, I look like a survivor. If I go with a beautiful woman on my arm, looking untouched and arrogant, I look like a king. Biber's heart hammered against her ribs. You want me to go with you? I'm a waitress, Lorenzo. I don't know how to be. Whatever you need. I don't need a mafia princess, Lorenzo whispered, his hand sliding down to rest on her shoulder. His grip was possessive. I had one. She tried to blow me up. I need someone real. Someone who has the courage to slip a note to a killer. He turned her chair so she faced him. Be my date, Biber. Be my shield for one more night. Do this, and I will pay for your brother's surgery. Full recovery. Best rehabilitation in Switzerland. I will set you up for life. Biber looked at him. It was a deal with the devil. But for Toby, she would walk through hell. One night, Biber whispered. One night. Lorenzo agreed. But be warned, Biber. When we walk into that room, you are mine. You belong to the Moretti family. There is no going back. The preparation for the gala was not a makeover. It was the construction of a weapon. A team of stylists arrived at the fortress at dawn. They didn't speak English. They spoke the language of silk diamonds and concealment. Biber was polished, plucked, and painted. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was cascaded in loose, glossy waves down her back. Her makeup was sharp, smoky eyes and blood-red lips. Then came the dress. It was a custom piece Lorenzo had commissioned overnight. Deep midnight blue velvet off the shoulder with a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh. It hugged every curve of her body like a second skin. Around her neck they placed a diamond choker that felt heavy. It looks like a collar, Biber murmured to the mirror. It's a claim, a deep voice said from the doorway. Lorenzo stood there. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him to perfection, a black mask in his hand. He looked devastating, dangerous. He walked into the room, dismissing the stylists with a wave of his hand. He stood behind Biber, looking at their reflection in the mirror. He looked like the darkness, and she looked like the moonlight caught in it. You are beautiful, Lorenzo said. It wasn't a compliment. It sounded like an accusation. I feel like a fraud. Biber admitted, her voice trembling. I don't belong in your world, Enzo. You saved the king. Lorenzo said, his hands resting on her waist, his thumbs tracing the velvet. That makes you royalty. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring, a massive sapphire surrounded by black diamonds. Give me your hand. Biber hesitated. What is this? Bianca was my fiancée, Lorenzo said. If I walk in with a new woman, she cannot just be a date. She must be more. You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? Biber gasped. For tonight, Lorenzo said. It insults Dante. It shows I replaced his spy in less than 24 hours. It is the ultimate power move. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy, cold. Do not take it off, he commanded. As long as you wear this, no one can touch you. You are under the protection of the Capo dei Capi. The drive to the city was tense. The gala was held at the Pierre Hotel. Security was tighter than the Pentagon. When the limousine pulled up, the paparazzi were already swarming. Flashbulbs popped like gunfire. "Put on your mask," Lorenzo said, handing her a delicate lace mask. He donned his own, a black Venetian domino mask. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "If you feel afraid, squeeze my arm. Do not look down. Look them in the eye. You are above them." The chauffeur opened the door. The moment Lorenzo stepped out, a hush fell over the crowd. Then chaos. Moretti. "Is that Moretti? I thought he was dead." Lorenzo ignored them. He reached a hand back into the car. Baber took it. She stepped out the velvet dress, catching the light. The sapphire on her finger blazed. Lorenzo pulled her flush against his side, his arm wrapping around her waist like a steel band. He guided her up the red carpet, walking with a predatory grace. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Hundreds of people in masks, the elite of the criminal underworld. The air smelled of expensive champagne and secrets. When the announcer declared Lorenzo Moretti and guest, the music actually stopped. Every head turned. Across the room, standing near the orchestra, was Dante Russo. He was holding a glass of champagne, laughing with a corrupt senator. When he saw Lorenzo, the glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Lorenzo smiled. It was a cruel, shark-like smile. He leaned down to Baber. "Showtime, amore." He walked her straight through the center of the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. They walked right up to Dante Russo. Dante was pale, his eyes darting to the exits. "Enzo," Dante stammered. We heard terrible news. A tragedy." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Lorenzo drawled. He reached out and plucked a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter, handing it to Baber. "And who is this?" Dante asked, his eyes fixing on Baber. He looked at the ring. His eyes widened. "That's the Moretti heirloom." "This is Baber," Lorenzo said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "My future wife." Gasps rippled through the room. "Wife," Dante choked out. "But Bianca." "Bianca decided to take an extended vacation," Lorenzo said, his eyes boring into Dante's. "She realized she wasn't cut out for this life. She was too duplicitous. I prefer a woman with loyalty, a woman who knows how to spot a trap." Dante's face turned gray. He knew that Lorenzo knew everything. "Enjoy the party, Dante," Lorenzo said, clapping the rival boss on the shoulder hard enough to bruise. "It might be your last." Lorenzo steered Baber onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a waltz. "You did perfectly," Lorenzo whispered as he pulled her close. Baber was trembling. "He looked like he wanted to kill me." "He is terrified of you," Lorenzo corrected. "Because he doesn't know who you are. The unknown is the scariest thing to men like us." They moved together. Baber had never danced a waltz, but Lorenzo led her with such absolute control, she didn't need to know the steps. She just had to surrender. His hand on her back was hot. The smell of him, sandalwood and danger, filled her senses. For a moment, the room faded away. It was just the two of them. She looked up into his stormy eyes behind the mask. "You're good at this," she whispered. "Lying." Lorenzo stopped spinning. He pulled her closer until her chest was pressed against his. "I am not lying about everything," he murmured. He looked at her lips. The tension was electric. "The ring looks good on you, Baber. Too good." Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered. Lorenzo's head snapped up. His body went rigid against hers. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice dropping an octave. What is it?" "The music stopped," Lorenzo said. "But the orchestra is still playing." He was right. The musicians were moving their bows, but the sound coming out was a pre-recorded loop. The real musicians were gone. "It's a setup," Lorenzo hissed. "Dante has a plan B." Crack! A single shot rang out, shattering the chandelier above the center of the room. Screams erupted. The crowd stampeded. Lorenzo didn't run. He grabbed Biber, swept her off her feet, and dove behind a heavy marble pillar just as automatic gunfire shredded the space where they had been standing. Lorenzo muttered, pulling a handgun from the back of his waistband. He looked at Biber, his eyes wild with adrenaline. "Do you trust me?" Biber looked at the gun, then at him. "I don't have a choice." "Wrong answer." Lorenzo grinned a reckless, dangerous grin. "But it will do." The ballroom was a kill box. Smoke grenades hissed across the floor, filling the opulent space with thick grey fog. The screams of the elite were drowned out by the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of suppressed submachine guns. Lorenzo pressed Biber against the cold marble of the pillar. "Listen to me closely," he shouted over the noise. "Dante locked the doors. He's going to burn this whole place down to get to me. He doesn't care about the collateral damage." "What do we do?" Biber cried, clutching his lapel. "We hunt," Lorenzo said. He peeked around the pillar, fired 2 shots, and ducked back as debris exploded near his head. "Marcus!" Lorenzo yelled into his cufflinks, a hidden comms device. "Boss, we're at the north entrance. They blocked it with a truck. We're blowing it now. 2 minutes." "2 minutes is too long," Lorenzo growled. He looked at Biber. "Can you run in those heels?" Biber looked down at her strappy stilettos. She bent down, unbuckled them, and kicked them off. She stood barefoot on the shattered glass and cold marble. "Yes," she said fiercely. Lorenzo looked at her with something akin to awe. "God, you are magnificent." He grabbed her hand. "We need to get to the kitchen, the service elevator." They moved. It was a blur of violence. Lorenzo moved like a dancer, shielding her with his body. Every time a shadow emerged from the smoke, Lorenzo fired. He was lethally precise. They reached the kitchen doors. Lorenzo kicked them open. Inside it was quiet. Too quiet. Standing in the center of the stainless steel kitchen was Dante Russo. He was holding a gun to the head of a chef. Flanking him were 4 heavily armed mercenaries. "End of the line, Enzo," Dante sneered. "You think I didn't know about the service exit? I invented the game." Lorenzo stopped. He held his gun up, but he was outnumbered 5 to 1. He stepped in front of Biber, pushing her behind his back. "Let the girl go, Dante," Lorenzo said evenly. "This is between us." "No." Dante laughed. "She's the reason you're alive. She's the lucky charm. I think I'll take her. Maybe she can slip notes for me." He raised his gun, aiming at Lorenzo's chest. "Say goodbye to your kingdom, Moretti." Biber's hand brushed against the counter. Her fingers found something hard and cold, a cast-iron skillet. Dante was focused entirely on Lorenzo. The mercenaries were watching Lorenzo. No one was watching the harmless waitress. Biber didn't think. She remembered the rage she felt when her father died. She remembered Toby's face when the glass shattered. She lunged. With a scream that was pure primal fury, she swung the heavy iron skillet with both hands. Clang! It connected with the side of the nearest mercenary's head with a sickening crunch. He dropped like a stone, his gun skittering across the floor. The distraction was instantaneous. Dante flinched, turning toward the noise. That split second was all Lorenzo needed. Bang, 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 4 shots, 4 bodies. Lorenzo moved so fast he was a blur. He put a bullet in each mercenary before they could retarget. Dante fired wildly, missing Lorenzo and hitting the spice rack. Lorenzo closed the distance. He didn't shoot Dante. He tackled him. The 2 dons crashed into the prep station, scattering flour and knives everywhere. It was a brutal, ugly fistfight. Dante was strong, but Lorenzo was fighting with the rage of a man protecting his mate. Lorenzo pinned Dante to the floor. He wrapped his hands around Dante's throat. "You threatened her," Lorenzo roared, slamming Dante's head into the tiles. "You looked at her." "Enzo, stop!" Beba screamed. She grabbed Lorenzo's arm. "Stop, the police are coming. You can't kill him here." Lorenzo froze. His chest was heaving. His knuckles were white. He looked down at Dante, who was gasping for air, beaten and broken. Then he looked at Beba. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She was barefoot, covered in flour and blood, holding a frying pan. Lorenzo let go. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, though it was torn. He looked at Dante. "You live because she asked. Remember that. Every breath you take is a gift from the woman you tried to kill." Marcus and the security team burst through the back doors. "Boss, the extraction team is here. Take the trash out." Lorenzo gestured to Dante. "Hand him over to the feds. Anonymous tip. Let him rot in a cell." Lorenzo turned to Beba. He walked over to her. He didn't say a word. He just scooped her up into his arms, bridal style. "You can put me down," Beba protested weakly. "I can walk." "You are barefoot in a war zone," Lorenzo said, walking toward the exit. "And you just took out a hitman with a frying pan. I am never letting you walk again, if I can help it." He carried her out into the cool night air, past the sirens, past the flashing lights. He placed her in the back of the waiting limousine. He sat beside her, the adrenaline fading, leaving a heavy silence. "You saved me again," Lorenzo said softly. "We're even," Beba whispered. "No." Lorenzo shook his head. He took her hand, the one with the ring. He lifted it to his lips and kissed her knuckles, smearing a bit of blood on her skin. "I owe you everything, Beba Vance, and I always pay my debts." He leaned in. This time there was no gunfire to interrupt them. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hungry, desperate, and possessive. It tasted of survival. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "We're already fake engaged." She breathed, her heart racing. "No," Lorenzo said, his thumb stroking her cheek. "For real. Be my queen. Rule this city with me. I can't do it without you. You are the only person in the world who isn't afraid of the fire." Beba looked at him. She thought of her old life, the spilled drinks, the unpaid bills, the constant fear. Then she looked at the man who would burn the world down to keep a drop of rain off her head. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Lorenzo smiled. It was the first real, genuine smile she had ever seen on him. "Okay, but I have one condition. Anything. Name it. No more galas." She laughed, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I prefer takeout." Lorenzo laughed, a rich, deep sound. "Deal." The sun over Lake Como didn't just shine. It felt like it was gilding the world in gold. The Villa d'Este was closed to the public, an occurrence that usually required a head of state, but today it was for the wedding of Lorenzo Moretti and Beba Vance. Beba stood on the balcony of the bridal suite, the breeze playing with the lace of her veil. She looked different than the girl who had scrubbed dishes in the back of the obsidian room 12 months ago. She stood straighter. Her skin glowed with health, no longer grey from exhaustion and stress. But the most significant change was in her eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. "You're thinking about the note," a voice came from the doorway. Baber turned. It was Toby. He was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that matched Lorenzo's. But the miracle wasn't the suit. It was the fact that he was standing upright. He leaned heavily on a sleek ebony cane, his legs braced with cutting-edge carbon fiber supports. But he was standing. The surgery in Zurich, fully funded by the Moretti Foundation, had been a success. The months of grueling rehab, where Lorenzo had personally hired the trainers, had paid off. "I wasn't thinking about the note," Baber smiled, walking over to fix her brother's bow tie. "I was thinking about how much I'm going to cry when you walk me down the aisle." "I won't trip." Toby grinned. "Marcus practiced with me all morning. He's terrifying, by the way. He threatened the floor if it made me slip." Baber laughed. "Marcus is a teddy bear with a Glock. It's time, Bella," Marcus said, appearing behind Toby. The giant bodyguard looked uncomfortable in a formal suit, constantly adjusting his collar. "The Don is waiting, and you know how he gets when he has to wait. He starts reorganizing the seating chart." Baber took a deep breath. She picked up her bouquet white roses mixed with sprigs of wild rosemary. She took Toby's arm. "Ready. Ready," Toby said. They walked out into the garden. The guests were a mix of the most dangerous people in the world and the few normal friends Baber had made. But as she stepped onto the runner, the murmurs ceased. At the end of the aisle, standing beneath an arch of white flowers, was Lorenzo. He looked breathless. Lorenzo Moretti, the man who had stared down a firing squad without blinking, looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His eyes locked onto hers and didn't let go. He didn't look at the dress, the flowers, or the lake. He looked only at her face. When Toby successfully navigated the steps to the altar and placed Baber's hand in Lorenzo's, the Don leaned down to the boy. "You did good, kid," Lorenzo whispered, squeezing Toby's shoulder. "Go sit. Take the load off." The ceremony was short. They didn't need long vows. They had already promised their lives to each other in a bullet-ridden kitchen in New York. "Do you, too," the priest asked, "take this man to be your husband?" Baber looked at the scar on Lorenzo's cheek, a souvenir from the night he saved her. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And do you, Lorenzo, take this woman?" Lorenzo didn't look at the priest. He lifted Baber's hand, kissing the sapphire ring that had started it all. "She owns my soul," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying over the silence. "I do." The reception was a blur of music, laughter, and wine that cost more than Baber's old apartment building. Late in the evening, Lorenzo pulled her away from the dance floor. "I have a gift for you," he said, leading her into the villa's private library. "I didn't want to give it to you in front of the others." "Enzo, you already gave me a villa." She laughed. "And a husband. And my brother's legs. I don't need anything else." "This is different." He walked over to a small table covered by a velvet cloth. He pulled the cloth away. Sitting there in a simple gold frame was a cheap, wrinkled cocktail napkin. The ink was smudged, slightly stained with scotch. "Your fiancé set a trap. Leave now." Baber gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You kept it?" "I keep the things that matter," Lorenzo said softly. He stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. This piece of paper is the most valuable thing I own. It's the moment my life actually started." He turned her around, his eyes intense. "Dante Russo got 20 years in federal prison," Lorenzo murmured. "My enemies are quiet. The territories are secure. But none of that matters compared to this." He gestured to the napkin, then to her. "You saved me, Baiba. Not just from the bomb. You saved me from becoming nothing but a suit filled with violence. You gave me something to protect." Baiba reached up, cupping his face. "And you gave me a reason to be brave." Lorenzo leaned down, his lips brushing hers. "By the way," he whispered against her mouth, "I kept my promise." "Which one? The takeout?" Baiba pulled back, confused. "We're at a Michelin star wedding feast in Italy." Lorenzo grinned, that boyish, reckless grin she loved. "Look under the desk." Baiba crouched down. Hidden beneath the antique mahogany desk were 2 greasy boxes of New York-style pepperoni pizza, flown in on a private jet. "No way," she laughed. Lorenzo sat on the floor, tugging at his bow tie until it hung loose. He patted the spot next to him. "Sit with me, Mrs. Moretti. Let the guests eat the caviar. I want pizza with my wife." Baiba sat down in her $100,000 wedding dress, kicking off her heels. She took a slice of cold pizza and leaned her head on the shoulder of the most dangerous man in the world. He kissed the top of her head. Outside, the fireworks began illuminating the lake in bursts of red and gold. But inside the library, in the quiet, eating pizza on the floor, Baiba Vance knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the queen, and the king was finally at peace. And that is how a 10-second decision changed the fate of the entire underworld. Baiba proved that you don't need a gun to be powerful. Sometimes all you need is a pen and napkin, and the courage to speak up when everyone else stays silent. Lorenzo Moretti might have ruled the city with fear, but Baiba ruled Lorenzo with love. This story reminds us that true loyalty is rare, and when you find someone willing to risk their life for you, even a stranger, you don't just thank them. You marry them. They started with a warning, survived a war, and ended up sharing pizza on the floor of an Italian villa. It's the perfect reminder that even in the darkest worlds, there is always room for a little bit of light. Thank you so much for listening to The Paper Shield. If this story made your heart race or gave you butterflies, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more mafia romances. If you were Baiba, would you have slipped the note, or would you have run away? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading every comment, and I'll be pinning the best theory on what happens to Dante Russo in prison. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, stay safe and keep writing your own destiny. Bye.